Have you heard of one Humpty Dumpty? How he fell with a roll and a rumble, and fell off like Lord Oliver Crumple by the butt of the magazine wall.
Welcome to James Joyce's divine and delirious comedy, Finnegans Wake. In this episode, number 8, we'll hear Irish-Canadian actor and my good friend and colleague Richard Harte reading pages 34 to 39 from chapter 2 of Joyce's last novel. I'm Adam Seelig, the director of the reading you'll soon hear. Finnegans Wake is a production of One Little Goat Theatre Company. For the next 5 years, One Little Goat will film and record all 17 chapters, roughly 30 hours, of Joyce's Finnegans Wake before live audiences in various locations, screening and releasing them along the way with the aim of completing the entire book in time for its 90th birthday, May the 4th of 2029. One Little Goat Theatre Company is an official charity in Canada and the United States. If you'd like to support our work, please visit us online at www.onelittlegoat.org to make a charitable donation. And if monetary support is not an option, you can still help this podcast by rating and reviewing it and by spreading the word. To get in touch, you'll find our email address on the One Little Goat Theatre Company website, and we'd love to hear from you. From Emily Dickinson. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. If Finnegans Wake tells the truth, assuming there's even any truth in it to be told, then it does so at many slants from many perspectives, often in the dubious form of gossip. In the previous episode, episode 7, which opened chapter 2 of Finnegans Wake, we heard about the origins of our protagonist's name, H.C. Earwicker, and about possible rumors surrounding him. In today's episode, those rumors will travel further and faster. Humanity is, after all, quote, an imperfectly warm-blooded race, close quote, and don't we just love to talk? Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. The lies of Dickinson's second line offsets, maybe upsets, the truth of the first. In today's excerpt from chapter 2, the closest we can come to any definitive truth about Earwicker lies in the circuity of gossip, that loved and loathed source of news, or so-called news, or fake news. How much of this gossip, in other words, is information versus, quote, ill-formation, close quote? Should we take what we hear as gospel or, quote, gossipal? Facts can be suspect in a work of fiction, and Finnegans Wake, in addition to being a phantasmagoric poem, is a mammoth work of fiction within which we find many mini-fictions, however factual, about HCE. And as these little fictions go through the rumor mill, as they make their successful rounds on the gossip circuit, they gain mass and momentum. It's no coincidence that today's reading, which follows a zigzagging relay of HCE-related rumors, ends up at the racetrack, one of the fastest circuits around, where the gossip about Earwicker reaches a veritable gallop. The main event in today's reading is Earwicker's encounter with a guy described as, quote, a cad with a pipe. It takes place in Dublin's Phoenix Park, or as the text puts it, quote, the wide expanse of our greatest park, close quote. And indeed, Phoenix Park is great. At 7 square kilometers, it's twice the size of New York's Central Park, making it one of the largest urban parks in the world. The scene begins on the, quote, Ides of April morning, close quote, i.e. on April 13th, which we are told happens to be Earwicker's birthday. We are also told that this event is, quote, ages and ages after the alleged misdemeanor, close quote, a coy reference to the gossip that hounds HCE. Keep in mind that this tale of HCE's confrontation with the cad is itself the product of rumor, beginning not with an authoritative once upon a time, but with a far less reliable, quote, they tell the story, close quote. The Ides of April ominously echoes the Ides of March when Julius Caesar was assassinated, and Earwicker dressed in 7 items of clothing, dressed to the sevens, as we called it in the previous episode, could be foreshadowing a potential confrontation. Is this meeting of Earwicker and the cad in the park a chance encounter or a spontaneous confrontation? Is it innocent or threatening? Well, this is what seems to happen on that April morning. The cad with the pipe crosses paths with HCE and asks him, in a Wakian kind of Gaelic, something along the lines of, "How do you do? Could you tell me the time because my watch is running slow?" Ostensibly, this all sounds pretty innocuous. But as with the earlier encounter of two men, Mutt and Jute, in Chapter 1, some miscommunication ensues. HCE interprets the cad's words as a kind of attack and, in a panic, goes on the defensive. At this point, the narrative, adhering to Earwicker's state of mind, adopts the language of a cowboy-like showdown, so that instead of simply taking his watch out of his pocket and telling the cad that it's 12 o'clock, which appears to be what happens, so much for it being morning, HCE, we are told, is, quote, quick on the draw, close quote, when he pulls his watch out of his, quote, gun pocket, close quote. For all his cowboy heroics, however, Earwicker ends up stuttering out his response to the cad, launching into an unsolicited, cringe-worthy self-exoneration. Quote, "There is not one tittle of truth, allow me to tell you, in that purest of fib fabrications," close quote. This stuttering, which might betray HCE's guilty conscience, is a motif throughout the novel that I'll discuss in more detail in a minute. Gaping Gill, an innocent bystander, quote, "with infinite tact in the delicate situation seen the touchy nature of its perilous theme," close quote, politely extricates himself and walks off with his dog. Now it's evening, quote, "ere the hour of the twattering bards in the twitter litter between Druidia and the deep sleep sea," close quote. A wonderful quiet passage follows, filled with the gentle sounds of letters reduced to their essence, a double F, a double K, a single T, a single I. I love Joyce's writing and Richard's reciting of these gloaming sounds of our alphabet, somewhere between the language of birds and lovers. The cad, home for supper, recounts his Phoenix Park encounter/confrontation with Earwicker as best he can to his wife, and from here the zigzagging relay of gossip runs its course. In light of all this word of mouth, it makes sense that the text alludes hilariously to, quote, "Irish saliva," close quote, the main ingredient in Dublin gossip. So the cad, chewing the cud, tells his wife, the wife tells her priest, and the priest tells the science teacher Philly Thurston at the racetrack, where the horses, like the rousing rumor itself, take on a life of their own. Before we get to Richard's reading, I want to highlight the stuttering motif that features prominently in Earwicker's interaction/altercation with the cad. From the very first page of Finnegans Wake, stuttering plays a part.
Nor a voice from a fire bellows, Misha the tout to a Petrick.
And here's Richard reading a more pronounced example a few lines later, with stuttering built into the novel's first 100-letter thunder word.
The fall. Ba del Gallagher camino ron con blond toleron to one thon trova unans gone to order for knock. Of a once worn straight old par.
One page later, we hear of, quote, Big Mester Finnegan of the Stuttering Hand, close quote. On page 16 in the prehistoric dialogue of Mutt and Jute, Mutt stammers to Jute that, quote, I became a stummer, close quote. And there are many more examples. So why all the stuttering? As with everything in the Wake, we can read into it endlessly, but for now, let's consider two reasons. One, stuttering is a form of early elemental prehistoric speech. And two, stuttering as a betrayal of guilty feelings, or in the parlance of poker, stuttering as a tell. About one, stuttering as early human speech. Roland McHugh, in the introduction to his incredible annotations to Finnegans Wake, details the influence of 18th century philosopher Giambattista Vico on Joyce's writing. In The New Science, published in 1725, Vico proposes that the history of nations divides into three ages: divine, heroic, and human, plus a kind of fourth age or coda, during which the human age, number 3, reverts back to number 1, the divine age, in a rinse and repeat cycle, or a ricorso, which helps explains the cyclical structure of Finnegans Wake and adds another complexion to the word, quote, recirculation, close quote, on the novel's first page. And the word, quote, vicus, close quote, in that same first sentence, in addition to suggesting Vico Road in Dublin or the Latin word for village, can also point to our Italian philosopher, Vico. As McHugh explains in the first age, quote, the age of gods, brutish men are driven by shame and fear into caves to escape the thunder, which is the voice of the sky god, close quote. And as William Tyndall explains, in the divine age, prehistoric people, quote, like so many mutts and jutes, communicate by grunts, gestures, etc., close quote, including stutters. So going back to that first thunder word after the fall.
The fall. Ba 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 del garata camino ron con blond toleron to on thon trova unans con to order.
We can hear the thunder of the sky god or Zeus or capital G God, capital H himself, generating language, birthing the first babble, the first ba 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 da of an infant humanity. McHugh mentions that early humanity escapes thunder in, quote, shame and fear, close quote, which brings me to 2, stuttering as a sign of guilt. In today's reading, you'll hear the text stammer when mentioning, quote, the accusation against him, close quote, i.e. the accusation about HCE's, quote, alleged misdemeanor, close quote, or put simply, his sin. But what is this alleged sin? When Earwicker stutters during his unprovoked self-exoneration in response to the cad, the possible guilt revealed by his stammering is about what? McHugh offers a hint pointing out that Charles Parnell, the Irish nationalist, and Lewis Carroll, author of Alice in Wonderland, both men, referenced throughout Finnegans Wake, stuttered. The former, Parnell, committed the sin of adultery, which led to his political downfall, while the latter, Charles Dodgson, aka Lewis Carroll, photographed children in the nude as a hobby, which, while not a sin per se, has fueled speculation about Dodgson ever since, leading to rumors about his own, quote, alleged misdemeanors, close quote. And Earwicker, what's his sin? The examples of Parnell and Dodgson suggest that Earwicker, through the dream language of the wake, experiences inappropriate sexual desires. But don't we all, especially in our own personal private dreams? The answer is yes, we do. The scandal of Parnell falling for Catherine or Kitty O'Shea, then falling from political grace, is an eminently relatable tale because, as the wake reminds us on virtually every page, humanity, that is, all of us, fell from grace the moment Eve and Adam were swayed by the snake and ate the forbidden fruit. In today's reading, incidentally, Eden's famous apple becomes a far more suggestive fruit, a banana eaten by Eve, whose original Hebrew name is Chava, hence the mention of, quote, Hava banana, close quote. HCE, as a necessarily flawed character who contains multitudes, from biblical Adam to folksy Tim Finnegan to admired Parnell, is ultimately, quote, here comes everybody, close quote, as we heard in the previous episode. He's all of us, embodying our original and subsequent sins, with his occasional stutter reminding us those sins are always there, however deeply and unconsciously buried. So it's thanks to the forked tongue of the serpent and the forked lightning of the gods that our stuttering fall into sin and speech began. I'm going to close with the poem with which I opened, partly because it contains a flash of lightning and some thematic overlap with today's episode, but mostly because Emily Dickinson knew how to write a damn good poem. Here it is in full. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. Too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. Richard Harte's reading of Finnegans Wake Chapter 2 was shot and recorded in Toronto at Noonan's Irish Pub on June 26, 2023, with a live audience. The film premiered at the Toronto Irish Film Festival and Bloomsday Film Festival at the James Joyce Centre in Dublin. Now it's time to welcome you to Noonan's Irish Pub for Richard's reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, page 34, line 29, to page 39, line 13, for the continuation of Chapter 2.
We can't do without them. Wives rush to the rescues of man will two man while led is the law. Yes, it's our cadam. Villa pleach, villa plot. Fick up for flesh nearly, I'll mother no zol flen. If she's Lilith, pull early. Pauline, allow. And Mahler's a bush, keep black, keep black. Guiltless of much laid to him, he was clearly, for once at least, he clearly expressed himself as being with still a trace of his erstwhile burr, and hence it has been received of us that it is true. They tell the story, an amalgam as absorbing as calcium chlorides and hydrophobe sponges could make it. How one happy-go-gusty Ides of April morning, the anniversary, as it fell out, of his first assumption of his birthday suit, and rights in appurtenance to the confusioning of human races. Ages and ages after the alleged misdemeanour, when the tried friend of all creation, Tigerwood Roadstaff to his stay, was billowing across the wide expanse of our greatest park, in his caoutchouc kepi and great belt and hiding sacks and his blaufunks fustian and ironside jackboots and bagafad gaiters and his rubberized Inverness, he met a cad with a pipe. The latter, the luciferate, not the aureolate. Well, the odds are the stale Burton dag about in the same straw bamer, carrying his overgoat under his shoulder, sheep side out, his hose to look more like a comfrey gentleman and signing the pledge as gaily as you please. Hardily accosted him with, Guinness a tartool and Jimmy did her out and Finn. A nice how do you do in Pool Black at the time, as some of our old dazers may still tremblingly recall, to ask, could he tell him how much o'clock it was that the clock struck? Had he any idea by cockslock as his watch was Brady's? Hesitancy was clearly to be evitated. Execration is cleverly to be homicide. The earwicker of that spurring instant, realising on fundamental liberal principles the supreme importance, nexally and noxally, of physical life, the nearest help relay being ping chaos St. Patrick's Day and the Fenian Rising, and unwishful as he felt of being hurled into eternity right then, plugged by a soft-nosed bullet from the sap, halted, quick on the draw, and replying that he was feeling tipstaff, Q produced from his gun pocket his Jurgensen's shrapnel Waterbury, ours by communionism, his by user capture. But on the same stroke, hearing above the skirling of harsh Mother East, old Fox Goodman, the bellmaster, over the waste to south, at work upon the 10-ton thundering thunderous Tedder Tuller in the speckled church, Cahoonan's call, told the inquiring kidder, by Jehovah, it was 12 of 'em sidereal and tankard time, adding, but all, as he bended deeply with smoked sardinish breath to give more pondus to the copper stick he presented, though this seems in some confusion with the chapstuck ginger, which, as being of sours, acids, salts, sweets, and bitters compounded, we know him to have used as chaw for blown muscle, blood, flesh, and vim vital. Whereas the accusation against him had been made, what was known in high quarters as was stated in Morgan's Post by a creature in human form who was quite beneath par, and several degrees lower than your triple-hydred snake. In greater support of his word, it, quaint anticipation of a famous phrase, has been reconstructed out of oral style into the verbal for all time, with ritual rhythmics, increditary quietude, and 2 salmons stuck from successive accounts by Noah Webster in the redaction known as the sayings attributive of H.C. Earwicker. Prize on shillings, postlots free. The flaxen gygas tapped his chromometrum drum, now standing full erect, above the adjacent floodplain, scene of its happening. One burling gauntlet chop stuck in the hook of his elbow by ancient sign law, his gesture meaning "nee," pointed at an angle of 32 degrees toward his Duke de Fair's overgrown milestone as fellow to his gauge, and after a rendy present pause averred with solemn emotions, fire. Should you shake, comrade? Me only. Them 5 ones, he is equal combat. I have won straight. Hence my nationwide hotel and creamery establishments, which, for the honours of our mutual daughters, credit me, I am willing to take my stand, sir, upon the monument, that sign of our redemption, any hygienic day to this hour, and to make my hope to my sinfinners, even if I get life for it. Upon the open Bible and before the great taskmasters, I lift my hat, and in the presence of the deity itself, and well of Bishop and Mrs. Micken of High Church of England, as of all such have said, my immediate withdwellers, and of every living soul in every corner wheresoever of this globe in general, which useth of my British to my backbone tongue and commutative justice, that there is not one tittle of truth, allow me to tell you, in that purest of fabrications. Gaping gill, swift to make earth or stern to check self, diagnosing through Eustace tube that it was to make with a markedly post-pubral hypotitutionary type of Heidelberg man-like cavern ethics, lofted his slope and forward, bad sweat of God, good mother, and double notch onto it as he was greedily obliged, and, like a sensible ham, with infinite tact in the delicate situation seemed the touchy nature of its perilous theme, thanked him for guilders received and time of day. Not a little token of all the same, that was how the God's clock it was. And upon humble duty to greet his tisk minister, and he shall gild a gap gaper, and thee his mouldy voids, went about his business, whoever it was, saluting corpses. As a matter of course, one could hail them out had one hair too, for the monticules of scalp and dandruff droppings blaze his trail, accompanied by his trusty snorter and his permanent reflection. But gracious, I have met with you bored too late, or if not too warm and early. And with tag for Ildiat, repeated in his second mouth language as many of the big-timers verbatim words which he could baldly call to memory that same Kveldeve. Ere the hour of the twattering of bards and the twitter-litter between Druidia and the deep sleep sea, when suppertide and souvenir to Charlotte and Maud jointly came gently, and along the quiet darkenings of Grand and Royal, crept the hedge, when as to many a soft tongue's parky talk mute answer who softer pogio, Vanda always acquiescent, while studying castels in the blown and studying cowshots over the Norren, he spat. Careful convertedness, a mosaic dispensation about his hearthstone, if you please. Irish saliva, Masha the Holy. But would a respectable, prominently connected fellow of Iro-European ascendances with well-dressed ideas, who knew the correct things, such as Mr. Shall we sigh or Mr. Shall we laugh, expectorate after such a callous fashion? No, thank yous. When he had his belcher spook or took in his pocket, fuck, muse fed with his sockets after having supped of the dish sot and pottage, which he snobbishly dabbed peach Bombay, it is Raleigh only Luke and Took and pie, which he knows which sin after and pibered him, a supreme of excelling peas, bowed under Minshog's milk into white malt wine sour, Throve in the little bilker horsely relish chaffet in the snevel season, being as fair as a rat with fennel. And on this celebrating occasion of the happy escape, for a crowning of pot valiants, this regional platter, Benjamin of Bouilly, with a Spanish olive to middle-pointed zenith, was marrying itself, porco grasso, erebusked very deluxiously with a bottle of Finis Brewery 98, followed her second nuptials by a peace porter, grand cur, of both of which cherished table lights, though humbled the banquet is a layman's farewell. He obdurately sniffed the cobweb-crusted cocks. Our cads bit a strife, me Bernice Max Welton, with a quick ear for spittoons, as the aftertale hath it. Glaned up as usual with domestic husbandry, no persicks and armelians for thee, Pomerania. But, slipping a clave in her claw, broke of the matter among 111 others in her usual courtesy. Of faith, these first vespers womanly are, a secret pigly hando, Amanda Leverty dead of their man Foker, The next night, Nudge one as was Hegesipis over a hup of chili, her eyes dry and small and speech thicklish, because he appeared a funny colour like he couldn't study out hens no longer, to her particular reverend, the director, whom she'd been meaning in her mind primarily to speak with, asked into just a tablespoon, trusting between couple lips and any lorry promises. Might she never have Esnakerry pudding come humming up for her peckler piskins, that the gossip also delivered in his epistolier, buried tea toastily in there. Irish stew would go no further than his Jesuit's cloth. Yet, in Vinars Veritas Volatilis Valetotum, it was this overspoiled priest, Mr. Brown, disguised as a Vincentian, who, when seized of the facts, was overheard in his secondary personality as a Nolan and under-eared toll soul by accident. If that is the incident, it was an accident. For here the row of Eclectiastes of Hippo outpuffs the waitress of Have a Banana to pianissime, a slightly varied version of Crooked Ribs Confidentials, what Mary Eloise said, but for Josephine's sake, hands between hands, in fealty sworn, my braver best, my flower, and to the strains of the secret of a birth, hushly pierce the ruby and darlum of one Philly Thurston, a lay teacher of rural science and orthophonetics, of a near-stout figure in about the middle of his 40s, during a priestly flutter for safe and sane bets at the hippic rumfields of breezy Baldoyle on a date. W.W. goes through the card, easily capable of remembrance by all pickers up of events, national and Dublin details, the doubles of Perkin and Pollock, Peer and Prole, when the classic Anchorage Hackney plate was captured by two noses in a stablecloth finish, heck and neck, summonum, hevelo nevelo, from the cream count boy Cromwell, after a clever getaway by Captain Chapman, Blount's Rogue, Henry St. Dollock, Drummer Coxon, None the Big Third, and breakneck odds, thanks to you great little, bonny little, porty little, Willie Witcher, you're all their nappies, who in his never-lit, molded, popular cap was surely leagues unlike any other fantasy that ever toppled our timber muddies.
That was my friend and colleague Richard Harte reading from Chapter 2 of Finnegans Wake, pages 34 to 39, recorded with a live audience at Noonan's Irish Pub in Toronto on June 26, 2023. Join us in 2 weeks for episode 9, when Richard continues Finnegans Wake Chapter 2, in which we meet the scandalous balladeer Hosty. To be sure you don't miss any episodes, why not follow or subscribe to this podcast? For more on One Little Goat's Finnegans Wake project, including transcripts of this podcast and trailers for the films, visit our website at onelittlegoat.org. And to hear about upcoming performances and screenings, join our mailing list, also at onelittlegoat.org. Finnegans Wake is made possible by friends of One Little Goat Theatre Company and the Emigrant Support Programme of the Government of Ireland. Thank you for your support. And thank you to the artists for this episode: Richard Harte, sound by William Bembridge, podcast production by Sean Rasmussen, stage management by Jobina Sitoh, directed by yours truly, Adam Seelig. A big thanks to Jane Noonan and the staff at Noonan's Irish Pub, as well as to our wonderful live audience. Thank you to everyone at the Irish Consulate in Toronto, and to production consultants Cathy Murphy and Andrew Moodie. One Little Goat Theatre Company is a non-profit, artist-driven, registered charity. To donate or to find out more or to join our mailing list, please visit www.onelittlegoat.org. Thank you for listening.